This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for our slight delay due to technical problems. Welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop, the ICG committee member responsible for running our webinar programme. So for today's webinar, we're delighted to welcome back Dr. Rachel Laws of Laws Consulting. Rachel is a social psychologist and one of the original founders of commercial semiotics in the UK. She's been practicing commercially for 20 years and is also the author of 2 books on semiotics. Rachel has been delivering training on this and related methods for the Market Research Society, as well as the ICG and various other groups for more than 10 years now. And Rachel is also a fellow of the MRS. Her talk today will be the first part of a 2-part read-along of her latest book, Using Semiotics in Retail. ICG members can save 20% off the cost price of her book by using the code Semiotics20 when making their purchase. The code should be applied at the point of purchase on the Kogan page website. The first part of the book is all about the present day. It's full of practical marketing actions that marketers, retailers and brands can take today to aid and engage shoppers. Learn how to use semiotic signs to improve stores, fixtures and packaging. The second part of the book is about the future. Semiotics is a tool for thinking, and you can use it to get a view of the future of business, retail, employment, technology and human lives. Rachel will be talking about this in her second seminar, so do come back and join us on the 26th of May for that. Rachel is happy to take questions after each section or in a Q&A session at the end of her talk. So if you leave on your webcam and would like to ask a question, please raise your hand or type your question in the chat box and I'll read them out on your behalf. So we're really grateful to Perspective for sponsoring this webinar. Perspective Research Services provides help at every stage of the data journey as an end-to-end experience or simply to dip into when needed. They operate one of the largest independent call centres in the UK and state-of-the-art viewing facilities in the heart of London. They provide qualitative recruitment, face-to-face fieldwork, B2B mystery shopping, and data processing services. Perspective wanted to take this opportunity to also share some of their specialist in-field data collection methods in the retail space. All services can be assigned ad hoc to enhance current research programs, or they can tailor an end-to-end solution, creating an approach to meet specific research needs. To find out more, please do get in touch with them. Before I hand over to Rachel, here are some more webinars and events we have planned for you, so please make a note of these in your diaries. And don't forget to sign up for the second part of Rachel's webinar in a month's time on the 26th of May. Don't forget that we're able to offer great value sponsorship opportunities with each of our webinars. Sponsorship normally costs £120 for a lot of exposure on our website, mailers and social media, and of course on the day. Please contact Lucy if you'd like to know more. So our speaker today is Dr. Rachel Laws of Laws Consulting, and I'll now hand over to Rachel and to Lucy, who will be running through the slides on her behalf.
Thanks, Lucy, and thank you also, Sally.
Just make you a presenter. Over to you, Lucy, and to Rachel.
Thank you. Lucy, could you get one of my charts up? I don't mind which one, really. That one will do, why not? Thank you so much, that's awesome. And can everybody see that? Or feel free to make that a bit larger if you want to, Lucy, or as you please, whatever's comfortable for you, I guess. If you want to go full screen with that or whatever. There we go. Thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. All right then. Well, hello everybody. It's great to see so many friends here. You know, I feel like we can have a really enjoyable kind of warm, informal discussion this afternoon because I know of many of you already. So it's great to see semiotics enthusiasts here. 1 or 2 people are new to me, and I hope that you enjoy yourself. We've certainly got a lot of interesting things to share today. So Sally did a terrific job of introducing me already, really. So essentially, the thing to know about me is that I've been around for a long time. I live and breathe semiotics. I published a book using semiotics in marketing 2 years ago. And the brand new book, that purple one that you see there, is using semiotics in retail, which is a big book, it was a big thing to write at. Let's just go to the next page if we can, Lucy, and I'll try and explain what's what. So here's the deal, okay? If you've ever thought about writing a book about, market research or consumer insight or whatever, if you have the same experience that I did, you will find that your first book it writes itself, because you've already got all this stuff in your head and you've explained the method a million times and you know what you wanted to say, right? Your second book is going to be more of an adventure because you're addressing more new topics, right? So I set out to write a book about retail specifically, partly because a lot of my clients are in the retail sector, or they have an influence on retail. So Unilever is one of my biggest customers, and they contributed substantially to this book. So Keith Slice, who's Global Director of Consumer Insight, wrote the foreword, and his team members, Iris Kremers and Corinne Trentadew, kindly agreed to be interviewed in some depth about how Unilever is using semiotics to make shopping better, as they would put it. Okay, so I set out to write this book because I was doing a lot of work in retail and there seemed to be a need for it, right? And my clients had a lot of, when I say clients, I mean brand owners, some retailers, ad agencies, some larger brand strategy agencies who I sometimes will do consultancy with, very often had questions about things like how can we deal with the problem that shoppers walk around on autopilot all the time. So, it seems like people are just in a coma most of the time, and it's actually quite hard to wake them up in store. Or what can we do to engage shoppers? Or how do we cut through noise from competitors? Or a very popular one in the last few years has been, how do we successfully communicate brand architecture at the level of the fixture or in the aisle, right? So I get asked a lot of these kind of questions, and people always want to do it on a budget, and they always want to hear about stuff that they can do right here, right now. And that is what the first part of the book's about, and that's largely what we're going to be talking about today, right? While I was writing this book, which entails a lot of reading along the way, I began to realise that the task at hand was much, much larger than just telling people like Unilever how to create displays and fixtures and in-store promotions that are engaging and give people a great customer experience. Okay, I realised that it's a cliche to say that the world is changing very rapidly and that we're digital culture is accelerating. Okay, but there it is, right? And retail is part of that. Retail is quite central in some ways to everybody's lives because it's the main way in which most of us get stuff, whether it's food or clothing or whatever. So it plays a big part in our lives. And all consumer-facing brands at some point will have to go through a kind of retail process, right? So what that means is that in a rapidly changing world and a rapidly changing society, retail is going to show symptoms of the future very early, and to an extent it will lead the way into the future as well. And that's exciting because it's an opportunity for business and for researchers like you and me, and marketers like you and me, to change the future and make it into something that looks good, right? And so that's why we're doing this read along in two parts. So today I'm going to talk about the stuff that everybody asks me about how to decode retail environments, how to make shopping better, help people find their way around the stores and all that stuff. And then next time when I see you, we're going to talk about the future and where retail is taking us into the future, and business issues of the future that we'll want to deal with. Okay, so that's pretty much set the scene. Lucy, do you want to skip forward a slide or even two? Let's go to the next one. There we go. So I'm just going to say this very briefly. Some of you will have heard me say this before. If people ask you what is semiotics and what is it doing, it's studying consumer culture. Why? Because that is the place where consumers get their ideas, right? So traditionally in market research, we've made a big effort out of studying things that live inside people's heads, beliefs, attitudes, preferences, motivations, and so on, right? And to do that, we've used tools which were borrowed from psychology, such as projective tests and sensitive in-depth discussion guides and all that kind of thing. Psychological tools for getting psychological material out of people's heads. In recent decades, with semiotics leading the charge, really, there's a new paradigm has emerged, a new way of thinking about research, where instead of trying to get all the stuff out of people's heads, we're instead asking, how did it get in there in the first place? Where did all these attitudes and beliefs and preferences come from? And the answer is taken to be that they come from the surrounding culture of which everybody is obliged to be a part. Okay, let's go to the next page. So what do I mean by culture? Because it could be something vague, right? So the way that semioticians get a handle on culture is that we say, if you were looking for culture, you can find it in semiotic signs. That's where it resides. So a semiotic sign is a small unit of communication which is capable of delivering some kind of meaning. So all of us on this call today have some experience in marketing, and I'm sure all of us have got some experience in retail as well. And there you can immediately see, I'm sure, from looking at these two images side by side, that one is better than the other. Okay, so this one on the left is just no good. It's all right for communicating low prices. We've got some semiotic signs in place that make that believable. In particular, this kind of bald on the nose statement saying low price, it's just very straightforward about it. It's a good tone of voice for price messaging. And just as importantly, we've got this red and white colour scheme, which is recognised all over the world as being part of a colour palette, which is used to communicate things like discounts, money off, promotions, and essentially just low prices, anything to do with getting more stuff for less money. So that all the semiotic signs here are supporting this low price message, but there's absolutely nothing in this image which supports the idea of fresh. So here we've got somebody telling you fresh, but where's the evidence? It's all telling and no showing. Right? This image over on the right is doing a much better job of communicating freshness because all the semiotic signs are pointing in the right direction, right? So instead of just announcing fresh and then hoping that people believe us, we've got some fruit here. It's not trapped away in boxes and packaging like you see on the left. It's out on display. It's nicely lit, brightly coloured, looks moist and shiny, arranged in these wicker baskets, a bit like a farmer's market. We've got this reversed out text in a kind of dark brown colour at the back. Could be a kind of tree trunk-like structure, or the sort of chalkboard sign that you would see at a farmer's market. So here on the right, we've got an attempt at saying fresh, but a better attempt. Why? Because all these semiotic signs are lining up in the same direction and all pointing at fresh. Right? So when we talk about investigating culture, a lot of the time that's what we mean. That if you're looking for culture, semiotic signs are where you're going to find it. Okay, let's go to the next page. So I'm not going to dwell on this, but take a screenshot of this now if you would like to join in with an exercise that we can do this afternoon. Just grab a screenshot of this this image right now. And then again on the next page, if you could go to the next one, Lucy. And if you want to screenshot that as well, you've now got an image of a grocery aisle, and you've got some semiotic prompt questions, which I would love to hear your thoughts on those, and we can come back to them in a kind of discussion section at the end. But for now, what we're going to do now is get to the main body of this sort of presentation. And I have in mind about half a dozen topics that I want to talk to you about that I'm going to do pretty concisely in just a couple of minutes each, because I would like to draw your attention to the full range of insights and semiotic tools that you'll find in this book, which, if you're a brand owner or a retailer, will help you to sell more stuff. And if you're a researcher, this type of research can differentiate you from your own competitors, help you write better proposals, and provide a more rewarding research experience. So let's take a look at the next page. Thank you. So one of the things you'll find in this book I just wrote is that there's a lot of prompts and hypotheses and trigger questions that you are invited to use to stimulate your own semiotic thinking. Now, semiotics has got a bit of a reputation for being academic and using long words, so I'm happy to share the good news that you don't need a degree in anything to get started with semiotics. You can begin with this simple question: where have I seen this before? And this is a question which you are asking on behalf of your consumer or on behalf of your shopper in order to make sense, understand how they are making sense of the world around them. So I'm going to share with you just briefly an example which came up in my book, which I think you'll enjoy reading about. Lucy, can we go to the next page, please? okay, so number one, this is jam, right? And it looks nice, doesn't it? It's got all the semiotic signs that you would expect, you know. We've got, let's just identify a few of them. So we've got these cloth wraps over the tops, making it look really homemade. We've got these decorative little fancy ribbons on that had to be tied on by hand. And we've got some red and white cloth, check cloth there, a bit like a picnic tablecloth, right? So these are just a few of the semiotic signs I can see here, which are what you would expect for selling jam, right? It looks wholesome. It looks like at least some of it might be handcrafted. It looks like it's full of natural ingredients. So let's go to the next page while I tell you a quick story about a jam shop that was not selling very much jam at all. Okay, so this is a fairly typical scenario for me when I'm doing semiotics. So a client of mine was the owner of a jam shop in a they've got a few in different European cities. They had this one store in mind, and they said, look, we've got this nice jam brand, people like it, you know, it's well regarded product, online sales are good, but this particular store is just not selling anything at all, right? And we don't know why. Can you go down there and have a look, right? So I went down there to take some photos, and if you want semiotic method, it can be sometimes be this straightforward. I went down there and to the store, had a look around inside and outside, and took loads of photos. And I could see that they had made an effort with the shop fitting, right? So they'd really made an effort with somebody had thought to themselves, well, this is a premium brand, so we'll make it look classy. That was clearly what had gone on. Okay, so they'd got a lovely white marble floor, and they got their retail staff dressed up in some very classic kind of black suits, and they got black shelving for the jars of jam to sit on, and they'd got some kind of like an arch in the roof, like a vaulted ceiling, and this was clearly a quite solid attempt at making it look at market, you know. And there was an outside bit on the outside of the store where they got a window basically, but there was essentially you couldn't really view into the shop. It was just for a display. And here they'd got a couple of jars of jam on plinths, just making them look really special, some nice velvet curtains, and a portrait of somebody who might have been the founder of the company, right? So it all sounds good in theory, and I could see what they were trying to do. Unfortunately, what I did was I took loads of photos, came back to my desk, looked at all the photos as a set, and asked myself, where have I seen this before? And that is where you can start verifying semiotic signs and identifying where you've run across them. And what you're doing this on behalf of the consumer because you're asking where they have run into these things before, right? So here's what I learned when I looked at all these pictures was that this jam shop was not selling any food because the whole store resembled something in between a crypt, a crematorium, and a columbarium. Okay, so they'd got a lot of wooden furniture, exactly like this, some of it in a light teak colour with brass fittings on, exactly the type of thing that you also used on coffins and caskets, unfortunately. Okay, they'd also got, if you want to go to the next page, thank you. I mean, they'd also got they'd got these staff dressed up like undertakers in their black suits. They'd got in the window display, they'd got these jars of jam in what looked like the jam was effectively inside an urn, which was sitting on a plinth, flanked by some velvet curtains and some flowers like you see here. They set up an actual funeral parlour for jam, and that's not going to be a good thing for selling food. So that's why you're asking this key question, where have I seen this before? Because sometimes people can't see what's hidden in plain sight, right? So I went back to them and said, look, this is, you know, a mess. I threw in a couple of examples here of how to do it better. Let's go to the next page. So this is Harrods, and it's a very old building, and they've got lots of architectural features that could be a bit like a crypt or a church if they were allowed to become that way, right? So we've got these rather sober tiled floors. We've got what looks like it might be an arched or a vaulted ceiling up here. There's a very decorative tiles, but they're a bit reminiscent on the wall there. They're a bit reminiscent of stained glass windows. So There's quite a kind of churchy vibe going on here, but they really worked hard to stop it from feeling oppressive or stop it from feeling like a place of death by doing things like allowing plenty of light through. Really helps to open the space up. Their staff don't look like they're going to a funeral, and they've got these wicker baskets everywhere, which help to our semiotic signs for what? Let's think: picnics, Christmas, extravagant gifts. So there's a lot of work going on here to capitalise on the sort of historical beauty of Harrods without disappearing down the road into undertakers and crematoria. Let's go to the next page. So here's what I actually said to my client. I was like, look, you've just opened a funeral parlour, and I'm not surprised people aren't buying any jam, okay? So I said, all right, look, where there's a problem, there's a solution. So let's have a look at what you could be doing. So the historical period that they were trying to allude to with this jam brand was the 18th century. So I said, well, all right, well, why don't I go out around London? You're just in the neighbourhood in central London, you know. Why don't I go out around London? Because there's loads of 18th century architecture and branding. Get some photos and I'll show you what the 18th century looked more like, because it didn't look like a modern day funeral directors, you know. So this is just one picture from a large set of pictures that I took for them. This is the window of Fortnum and Mason, and they were celebrating tea that day. So they'd got this elaborate window display with all these very fancy and fantastical teapots in 18th and 19th century style, very Alice in Wonderland. So you can just see two examples here. And I then went, really, there's so much in London that really helped to the client to understand what 18th century styles actually look like. It wasn't ever about looking like a funeral parlour. It was very much about, yes, people sometimes wore black, but the point of it was to offset some quite extravagant jewel colours and sugary pastels. And also the food at that time, at least food for wealthy people, was really elaborate. There used to be elaborate structures made out of pastry and all of this kind of stuff, right? Not to mention the furniture. Okay, so furniture in the 18th century did not look like a 21st century coffin, okay, with its teak wood and its little brass fittings. Furniture at that time was very common to decorate it, paint it actually with pastoral scenes, shepherdesses and all that type of thing, you know, rainbows and all that type of stuff. So I've then provided the client with a kind of library of, look, this is, if you want to say historical European elegance with your jam shop, here's, you know, 50 semiotic signs that you can use to do it, and things improved a lot from then on. Let's have a very quick look at the next couple of slides. I just wanted to flag this up to remind myself to talk about light, which was a topic that we'll come back to later. But if you want to provide a better customer experience, lighting is one of the most important things that you can pay attention to, especially if you're selling food. And let's go to the next page. Yeah, so here's just a couple of examples. So this address is actually more 16th century style. But as you can see, so it's not exactly on the date, but I just wanted to show an example of the kind of decorative textiles and generous shapes that were being used in Europe a few hundred years ago. Right? Nobody here is wearing a black suit looking like a lawyer, you know. And I just wanted to include this cake with its attractive flower arrangement of fruit over on the side here. Again, to emphasise that at the point in history that they're trying to reference, food was extremely decorative, and there's nothing wrong with bringing that into the present day. Decorating food in this kind of a way is very now, actually, and a great way to let people know that you care about their product, which is a topic that we'll come to a bit later. All right then, let's take, while we're on a roll, let's take a look at the next section. And I'm just going to talk for less time in this next section about Unilever. Now, there's a limit to how much I can say about Unilever, but what you can do is read the complete interview in chapter 2 of this book. And also, I gave a presentation with Unilever quite recently at a conference, and the video for that is on the Law Consulting website, so you can watch the video of Unilever as well. But I'll just briefly tell you about this. So let's go to the next page. Okay, so if you want to see the video where I'm presenting with Corinne of Unilever, you could just screenshot this and that'll give you the link. And let's go to the next page. And I'm just going to explain briefly what Unilever is doing with all of this stuff, right? So Unilever will usually come to me with specific problems, right? So, for example, they'll say, we want you to work on one of our savoury food brands. We've got a new brand architecture, but we find that in testing and market research that consumers can't find their way around. It's not clear to them. Can you help us fix it? So they will usually come to me with a specific problem, a specific brand, a specific country, a specific problem that needs solving, right? And I will then come back to them in the way that I've just been doing and talk about semiotic signs and how to make people want and feel things, right? And they often will observe that the some of the central insights that I'm offering them are in fact globally applicable, right? They love things that are available globally, that work globally. So whenever they spot one of these things, they will insert it into an app that they've developed, which they call Perfect Aisle, which is designed to improve navigation, improve engagement. It's retailers can use it, people within Unilever can use it, and it's a really nice app with a kind of checklist approach where, you know, if you're doing your merchandising or category management or arranging or designing a fixture, there's a number of there's like a checklist that you can kind of run through, full of semiotic insights, to ask yourself, you know, do you have adequate lighting, and in fact some of the things that we'll show you in a moment. So let's go to the next page. So this is one of the insights that Unilever's found helpful, and that's one of my fieldwork photos which I took in South Africa. So here's the thing, right? When people are going around stores, this is particularly true of grocery stores, but often many other types of stores as well. Most stores are set out on a kind of grid of aisles, aren't they? There's like this grid-like map that you're supposed to trundle up and down. And that can often leave people feeling like unpaid warehouse pickers, or a bit like a rat in a maze, you know, where you're kind of scurrying up and down and trying to find your way out, you know. Now, when you add to that some of the other problems that are regularly found in retail stores, like it's dark and there's poor visibility because the shelves have been stacked up so high that you can't see even what's 3 feet away from you. When you combine all these things together, you've got a pretty miserable, depressing experience, okay? So a lot of the insights that I offer to Unilever have to do with how to break up that grid. So one way to break up that grid that's been done very effectively here at this is quite a poor neighbourhood in a city in South Africa, but the store manager's done a fantastic job of making a sort of pyramid of these Lucky Star pilchards with their very striking modernist packaging. So what we've got here is something that has been accomplished on an extremely low budget, where the manager of this store has essentially created a 3D structure, a 3D object. It can be approached from any side, viewed from any side. And if you choose striking packaging, as has been done here, the result is not unattractive in any way. And most importantly, it helps to just break up that grid that eventually makes you feel like you're inside a machine. So that's one example of the sort of insights that are in this app of Unilever's, is what are you doing to break up the grid? Where possible, introduce a freestanding structure. Let's have a look at the next page. So lighting, I've talked about this a bit today, but I'll just throw in one last remark about this. So this is another fieldwork photo of mine. I took it in the Netherlands. And I took this photo a few years ago, and I think it's looking a bit dated now because people are becoming very sensitive about plastic waste. And I think they'd probably rather, you know, see their fresh fruit packaged in something which looked a bit more sustainable. But what this was doing at the time was to really showcase the fruit. So we've got these quite minimalist black plastic tubs with their clear lids, and everything about these minimalist tubs is there to showcase the fruit and its beauty, right? We've got no intrusive labels in the way obscuring our vision. We've got no sort of intrusive branding. That packaging exists for only one reason, and it is to recede into the background and make the fruit look really good. Now, that packaging and the fruit inside it is really showed off to its best when you've got excellent spotlighting. So this particular grocery store had a lot of really brilliant and focused spotlighting to draw attention to these products. And the result, as you can see, was pretty spectacular. I mean, it really was a visual circus of colour. So I'm saying this because I want you to observe how dark most stores are and how the lighting in many stores, especially your average supermarket, really makes people look ill. You know, it doesn't cost a lot to improve the lighting in store, and it has dramatically better results. Let's go to the next page. Curves are super important, and so this photograph I didn't take myself. I was kindly granted permission to use it in the book by the owners of this store, Hofstede Optiek, who are opticians in the Netherlands. And they hired a team of architects to design their flagship store for them, and it looks great, doesn't it? So the first thing I'm sure you'll notice when you look at this is these huge, great swooping curves that we see everywhere. And then so that's the number one semiotic sign that we've got going on here, and it's the direct opposite of that grid, isn't it? And then what else have we got here? We've got quite a bit of wood. Here, rather than the wood being made into a sort of angular coffin shape with some brass fittings on it, where the wood has been forced into a shape that it was never meant to be. Here we've got wood doing exactly what it is nature intended it to do, which is to kind of swoop around and be organic and create a feel of naturalness and flow. It's really something quite special for an optician's. Now, they've also done clever things with lighting again here and choice of colour, like this purple and so forth. That all makes it feel quite adult and sophisticated and very modern. Now, not everybody is going to want to go this far, but again, when you think about that overwhelming, dominant grid which imposes itself on most stores, then anything you can do in this direction, including anything that you can do with introducing freestanding structures and things like that, is going to improve your customer's experience. And frankly, if you're at the level of designing things like fixtures, it's really going to help you stand out from the crowd. And it's not that hard to design a skin which can sit on the front of a fixture, which will give it some a bit more of an organic shape and make it feel more inviting. And the whole idea really is to show people that you as the brand owner or you as the retailer have exercised some care and imagination in putting this display together, and simultaneously to break people out of this unfortunate situation of being in a dark maze and essentially being an unpaid Amazon worker. That's what we're trying to get to and what we're trying to avoid. Let me just pause there and see if we've got any questions or comments before I kind of talk a bit more about different stuff. How are we doing so far? Feel free to put in or yeah.
Nothing's been written in the chat box yet. Does anybody want to raise their hand and ask a question at this point?
No question, just enjoying yeah, that's interesting.
Hi, Caroline.
Hello.
Did you have a question or a comment, Caroline?
No, just say I don't have a question. Sorry, but I'm just.
Okay, no worries. All right. In that case, I'll just assume that everyone's rapt with attention. All right. Look, here's what I might do: is let's go forward a bit. And Lucy, can you find me a section on pleasure and desire that starts around page 29? There's tons in this deck, by the way, everybody, as you can see, and I'm sure we can make it available to you after the fact. All of these pictures of Unsplash. Yeah, let's talk about this. Let's go to the next page. I want to dedicate a few minutes to this because I think it's a really interesting topic, and it is a topic that comes up in chapter 3 of this book, where a lot of my clients want to know what they can do to arouse people and stimulate them and make them feel excited. Okay. And so I thought about this at length while I was writing, and I realised that we're selling broadly two things, okay, to potentially to two different sets of customers. So we've got immediate pleasures, and then we have more long-term desires. Let's just briefly go to the next page. Why does it matter that there are two different kinds of pleasure or desire? It matters because they attach themselves to different socioeconomic groups, right? And that matters as well because it shapes taste. So that's why different consumers have different tastes, okay? So this was a piece of work, that rebranding work for Magnum. It's another Unilever brand that I was involved in not that long ago, just a few months ago, where the brand mark changed. So over on the left, you've got the before option, and here's the new version on the right. Okay, and so the old version worked well for a long time, but over time it became less good at communicating anything like premium. So consumer perceptions of how premium it was were kind of going into decline based on the brand mark and packaging. So something needed to change. Okay, so I worked with a team from Unilever and also the design agency Sun House to put something together which would be more semiotically pleasing. Okay, and just a bit better at communicating at market. So there's a lot I could say about this. But what I will simply notice is, and you may be able to observe as well, is that the old version of this brand mark on the left is a bit flashy, right? It's got very shiny gold on the big M there and on the details, and it's a bit, by contemporary standards, it's a bit brassy, okay? It's a little bit in your face. What happens is that consumer taste changes over time. So gold, which is a very reliable semiotic sign for something like premiumness or even luxury, still works. But contemporary audiences, especially those who feel like they are happy to pay a bit extra for something special, want to see this semiotic sign of gold, meaning luxury, expressed in a more sophisticated way. So what we've got here is less flashy, it's less shiny, it's less brassy, it's softer, it has more depth and luster. Okay, so what we've got here is Magnum moving away from something which was very loud towards something which speaks in a quieter voice, and that is going to help us over the next couple of pages. Let's go to the next page, please. So I really thought a lot about taste and why people like the things they do and how that lines up with different demographics. And of course, while I was researching and reading, I quickly found myself once again with the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, who wrote a fantastic book back in 1984-ish called Taste, in which he did some pretty heavyweight semiotics on why people like the things they do. Right now, here's what he had to say. He came up with this idea of habitus, which we could just summarize that as saying it something a bit like lifestyle, but it comes with a way of thinking, right? So Bourdieu's idea was that he said the reason why working class people and middle class people have got different tastes is because they have different lives. Okay, so he said if you look at the lives of working class people, they just do more physical work, right? There's less time spent sitting at a desk making a living using your brain, being an accountant or a marketing consultant, and a lot more physical labour. Labour which takes a toll on your body and is tiring, you know, whether that's doing a trade or whether it's doing unpaid childcare or cleaning other people's homes. Right? So he said it's not a surprise if people who kind of work hard for a living, when they get home, they want to be comforted and indulged with the same immediacy and the same impact and the same energy that their work was having on them, right? So he said this is why people like, you know, alcohol and big flavors and things with loads of sugar and quite big presents at Christmas time and sunshine holidays in Ibiza and music that gets better when it gets louder and so on and so on. Okay, so let's on in contrast then. So there you've got something like a huge ice cream, right? In contrast, he said, middle class culture, which is continually trying to put some distance between itself and the mass market, is all about deferred gratification. Right? He said middle class people will train their kids in the art of deferred gratification for a very young from a very young age. Right, so don't play now. Do your homework now and play later. If you do your homework now, then you'll pass your exams and then you'll be able to get into university and you work hard again and you'll be able to get a good job and eventually in many years you'll be able to retire. You see what I mean? So middle class culture is very much about deferred gratification. And by the time people reach adulthood, they've really developed a taste for things which take a little bit of investment, like single malt whiskey. It's difficult to like when you first get to know it. Right? It requires a bit of cultivation of taste. And they like colours that don't really have short names, and they like holiday destinations that other people haven't been to. And let's take a look at some more images on the next couple of pages. And then I can see, thank you, the Caroline's question in the chat, which I'll come to in a moment. So what Bourdieu is saying, and I think this is still holding true today, is that you've got groups of consumers for whom pleasure is really, really important. Right? And those groups of consumers want big flavors, big bright color palettes, joy, and they want things to be sensational and exciting. And then let's go to the next page. And then you've got a demographic of more affluent consumers who are, made happy by things like olive green, right? And they like abstract art that takes a little bit of interpreting, and they've learned how to appreciate a kind of less is more aesthetic, right? You don't need the world's biggest ice cream, So, and I think we've got some more of this stuff on the next page as well. If we could have a look at the next page. Yeah, here we are. Here's quite a kind of here's a shop which is not splashy. It's not selling the world's largest ice creams. It hasn't got any tinsel. It's probably not playing house music, but it has got a lot of semiotic signs which appeal to your more middle class customer who likes searching for things, and they like things to be a little bit remote, and they like colours that are quiet and subdued. And these are the same customers who will spend money on things like education programs, where what you're buying is a kind of imaginary version of yourself in 6 months when you've learned how to speak Portuguese. And these are the same people who will go on waiting lists for things, so you can put yourself on a waiting list for a particular handbag or whatever it may be, or you can book tickets for something that's happening 6 months ahead, and spend every day yearning and counting down the days and looking forward to it. Right. So 2 ways to make consumers really happy, and this very much applies to shopping. Right. You can be in your face with the sugar and the colours and the alcohol and the sensational experiences, or you can really pull on with such pleasure, right? Or you can really pull on their heartstrings with desire. So let me pause then and come to a couple of questions. Caroline, how do we know that those valuing luxury prefer a less brassy gold? It is. You're right. I think it is about noticing it's about noticing what brands are doing. It's about noticing what kinds of things consumers do and what they want other people to notice about themselves. Both of those things are available without doing qual, although there's nothing wrong with doing qual, certainly. But honestly, it's not a big surprise if, some demographics of consumers like opera and other ones like to go clubbing. It's not a big surprise.
Just when you said that, I just thought of the shop Oliver Bonas
Yeah.
that does quite a lot of gold jewelry.
Oh yeah.
And it's all quite sort of matted at the moment. There's sort of the style of the jewelry. There's not
Is
much
it?
shiny stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the other thing is we've got sustainability is coming through now as well, you know. I mean, because Bourdieu was writing about this stuff back in the early 80s, and it was certainly true then. What's changed now that I think he would be really interested in if he were around today is that sustainability is the new thing now. So that has really, because people with people who wanted to thoroughly inculcated into middle class culture were already knew about stealth wealth, you know, where you don't need to flash your designer labels around. It's all about comfort and technological superiority, and it's about not being too obvious and displaying too much. But now sustainability is the thing. You've got to be pretty wealthy to afford the sustainable versions of some of those brands out there. I'm thinking about beauty, apparel, stuff like that, you know. So now more than ever, if you've got kind of undecorated brown packaging and you know stuff that's been recycled, you can charge more for that than you ever could now. And look at fragrance as well, you know. I mean, it's all about refillable bottles now. So again, this doesn't really set limits on what you can charge. The other thing I want to say back to Sally is that where you say is immediacy a question of generation and not just social class. Yes, it is, and in a sense, you know, there's something quite because the thing is about very young people. By definition, they're quite close to childhood still, and so in a sense. All very young adults, by virtue of being young, tend towards these more immediate pleasures. They like impact and sensation and things that arrive immediately, you know. And I guess maybe as people get older that they're a bit more patient and a bit more interested in history. However, I do want to come to if eventually I think that social class has a lot to do with it because middle class culture invests so much in teaching its own members, really from birth, that things are better when they are quieter, more distant, require more education to become involved with, are more remote, have to be earned in some moralistic way. And I don't think that that's just a function of aging. I think that it seems to be a feature of middle class culture. So I'm bringing all of this stuff up because it translates really well into retail settings. So as long as you know what you're doing, whether you're trying to put together something like this, which is designed to appeal to middle class consumers who know what kind of semiotic dog whistles to look for with this, look at the colour of that paint. How would you describe that colour? You're going to need about 3 words to nail it down, you know. It's not blue, is it? You know. So middle class consumers know how to read those semiotic signs, and it acts like dog whistles, and it enables you to charge premium prices, right? And at the same time, you know, you don't if what you want is to be someone like Lush, let's say, or perhaps the Body Shop, or something which is, you know, how you can smell Lush stores down the street. If that's what you're going for, then we've got plenty of options available to us with different semiotic signs, where fragrance is a huge one. You want to be able to smell Lush all down the street. You want them, yes, exactly, Farrow and Vaughan, exactly, Caroline. You want people to go, oh, I can smell peach Bellini. It must be spring at Lush, you know. So these are all things which can be enacted in store pretty straightforwardly, and it really just depends what you're aiming for, and it depends on being consistent. So just be aware of the semiotic signs that you want to use, and of course there's a whole ton of them in this book, list of them that you can select from, and just be consistent with it. And I might just stop talking there and see if we've got any more questions.
I don't think we've got any more questions immediately, Rachel, but we are running short of time now. So if anybody does have any last questions for Rachel, otherwise maybe you'd like to wrap it up, Rachel.
Okay, so I believe we'll be able to share this deck with you. And can we just go right to the end, Lucy, to page 50? That's 2 before the end. What Lucy's going to bring up for us eventually is a discount code, so you can get 20% off this book, or indeed the first book, where you'll find all of these. There we go. That's the one I wanted. Thank you. Use this code at koganpage.com if you want to get money off the book. And I've just about made a start today on tackling some really big issues about what do people want and how do they want it, right? And so we're starting to move away from talking about fixtures and packaging and towards talking about the state of humanity. And that is what we're going to address next time in part 2. Join me when we talk about the future. Richard Smith, I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to your question. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Please start a conversation with me on LinkedIn and I will explain in detail. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks everybody for joining me.
Thank you very much, Rachel. It really has been fascinating, and I've been drooling over some of those photos that you've been showing us, so well done for that. To everybody else for logging in, thank you very much for joining us today. Do come back again in a month's time for the second part of Rachel's webinar. We've also got another one on psychology, I think, in 2 weeks' time. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks again to Rachel, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon. See you next time.
Bye all.